Hi, today we're going to be looking at parabolas. And we've talked about parabolas already this year when we did our quadratic equations, but today we're going to be looking at them in terms of conic sections. And we're going to introduce a little bit of new vocabulary. We're going to learn two new words, focus and directrix. Now we've already talked about the vertex before when we talked about our quadratic equations. It's that point that's halfway between the focus and the directrix in this context, but we're used to seeing it as either our lowest or highest point of our parabola. Now the vertex here, if we were to draw a line that goes through the vertex, an axis of symmetry, it's going to cut our parabola into two equal parts. And the focus is a point that lies on that axis of symmetry, and it has a special role or special relationship with the directrix. Now the directrix is a line perpendicular to the axis of symmetry. So the axis of symmetry in the picture is going up and down, and our directrix is going left to right. Now if we were to choose or connect our parabola to the focus, and then from that same point on the parabola go down to the directrix, those values are going to be congruent to each other. In other words, if I took this segment here, it's congruent to this segment. This segment is congruent to this segment. And finally, this segment here, if we connected it to the vertex, those are also equivalent to each other. Now the focus is an exact point on this axis of symmetry, and it's usually referred to with the letter P. So we're going to use P with the focus and the directrix, and you're going to see this in our equations below. Now with our equations, it does look a little bit different than how we wrote parabolas in quadratic equations. This time, the variable that is squared is by itself. So we have x squared equals and y squared equals. Scoot this over a little bit. Okay. So over here on the left, that's the type of parabolas we're used to seeing, the ones that open up or down. And the format that we're going to use here is x squared equals 4py. So if we have x squared by itself, this is a parabola that's opening up or down. And you'll notice we have this letter p involved. P is going to be the one of the coordinates of our foci, or focus, 0, p, and we talked about foci when we dealt with ellipses. And then our directrix here is y equal to negative p. So focus is 0p, directrix is y equals negative p. Now over on the right, this is something new. We're opening left or right. So these are not functions, because a function can only, this would fail the vertical line test, because it would go through more than once. So our equation here, y squared equals 4px, is going to be a parabola that opens left or right. And for today, our vertex is going to be centered at 0, 0. Later on in the unit, we'll move into translating our parabola somewhere else on the graph. And then our focus and directrix also involve p. Focus this time is p, 0, and our directrix is x equals negative p. Now below here, I did kind of simplify all this information into a chart for you. So the first line of the chart deals with our x squared equals 4py. Those are the ones that open up or down. The focus is going to be 0p, directrix is y equals negative p, and our axis of symmetry is x equals 0. It's a vertical line. Now for our graphs that open left or right, it's our second row here, y squared equals 4px. Our focus is p, 0. Our directrix is x equals negative p, and it's going to have a horizontal axis of symmetry, y equals 0. Now one little kind of hint or clue to help you out with this, if you look at the focus and directrix, notice on this first one here, it's our y value. Here we have y equals, and notice the y does not have an exponent here. Now looking at that second line, our x is our y. Here we have x equals, and this time our x does not have an exponent. So that kind of can help you keep track of which is which. So I want to go through a few examples of this. And I'm going to leave this little chart here as a helpful reminder. Now first we have to figure out which row we're going to use, the top row or the bottom row. And our equation this time is x equals negative 1/8 y squared. And we're asked to identify the focus, the directrix, and the axis of symmetry. if we look at it, it doesn't look like either one exactly, but it does have a y squared. So that's kind of our clue that we're going to be using this second row. But we need to make it look exactly like that y squared. Okay, so if we're going to do that, I need to move that negative 1/8 over to the other side. To do that, I have to multiply by negative 8. So we end up with negative 8x equals y squared. And just so it looks exactly the same, I'm going to just flip those and make it y squared equals negative 8. Oh, I'm sorry, negative 8x. So there's our equation. Okay. Now, without doing any other work, now that we know it's like that second row, our axis of symmetry is going to be y equals 0. I'm going to just go ahead and list that up here. So our axis of symmetry, y equals 0. Okay. So we have that piece of information out. I can go ahead and cross it out. Won't need to find it. So now let's talk about the focus and directrix. To find either of those, I need to know what p equals. Well, I have this equation, y squared equals 4px. And I just kind of rearranged my equation to get y squared equals negative 8x. Now, if you notice, the y squares match up, the x's match up. So that means that this 4p has to be the same as negative 8. Those are the only two differences between those two equations. So 4p has to equal negative 8. And if I work out that equation by dividing by 4, I would get p is equal to negative 2. So now I can figure out the focus and directrix since I have p. So my focus is p0. So I'll have negative 2, 0 for my focus. Okay. Now for my directrix, the directrix is x equals negative p. So if I plug in p here, I'll have x equals negative 2, which two negatives make a positive. So I'd have x equals 2 for my directrix. Okay. Let's try another example of this. This time, we have x squared equals 2y. So it's already in the correct format. It looks just like my top row here. So that's the information I'm going to use. My axis of symmetry is now x equals 0. So I'll go ahead and write that down. So my axis of symmetry is our x equals 0. So I have that piece of information out of the way. Now for our focus and directrix, once again, I need to know what p equals. So I'm going to just write my x squared equals 4py underneath it. And notice that the x squareds match up, the y's match up. So that means 2 has to equal 4p. So if that's the case, p is going to be 1/2 since we divide by 4. Okay, so for our focus, this time since it's x squared, it's 0 comma p, since our y doesn't have the exponent. So we have 0 comma 1/2. So our focus is found. And then for our directrix, it's y equals negative p. So we'll have y equals negative 1/2. So we have 3 pieces of information. I'd like to do one more example. Okay, and this time we're going to work backwards. And we're going to look for an equation given the graph. Now I circled the 1 over here because we have to look at our units. You might be thinking each dash represents 1, but that 1's appearing on the second dash. So actually each line represents 1/2. Now down here, it's a little hard to see. This is our directrix. Okay, and it's 3 lines down from the vertex. So my directrix here is going to be y equals negative 3/2. Okay. So kind of keep that in mind. That's going to help us find out what p equals. because if we look, we have this equation here. Oops. Y equals negative p. So if y equals negative p and we just said y equals negative 3/2, p is going to have to be 3/2. Oops. Okay. Now we also notice that our parabola is opening up, which makes sense that we're going to use the x squared equals 4py, because when we deal with x squared, it opens up or down. So I'm going to go ahead and write my equation. X squared equals 4py. I just found out that p is equal to 3/2. So I'm going to plug that in for p. And if I multiply this out, 4 times 3 is 12. 12 divided by 2 is 6. So I get x squared equals 6y. Okay. So after you watch these notes, there is an assignment on Math Excel for you. So take some time to work on that. If you have any questions or comments, either email me or leave me a comment on Google Classroom, or stop into our Zoom meeting this week and I can help you there too. Thanks. Talk to you later. Bye.